What's your biggest problem while on the road or out at sea?
The internet has gotten so bad.
What's the solution?
We need more power.
You want fast internet while traveling on the road or at sea, and you've heard that Elon Musk has the answer. Well, maybe-ish. I'm going to give you a quick update on what to expect and when with Starlink. Post right now what you are currently using for mobile internet, whether you're out at sea or traveling across the world in an RV. Let me know what you're using for internet right now and if you're happy with it. Are you happy with what you got? What is Starlink? Starlink is Elon Musk's very ambitious effort to blanket the skies with tons of satellites to provide internet coverage to the entire world. Now, these are low orbiting satellites, which means low latency, which means fast internet speeds. It sounds amazing, and it is, but it may not solve all of your problems. Let's talk about the reality of using Starlink if you are traveling and need to rely on internet while on the road or out at sea. I read a great article at rvmobileinternet.com where I got the information I'm going to share with you right now. I suggest you check out the article linked below and consider becoming a member of rvmobileinternet.com. It's a great resource and I am a member. The satellites in a low orbit like these Starlink satellites need to be constantly in motion. For you to have an internet connection, you need to have one of those satellites pretty nearby overhead. And if they're always moving, it's going to be always handing off your connection from one satellite to the next one that's coming into range. Therefore, you need to have a bunch of satellites in coordinated orbits so that you've always got a connection. And those satellites in a coordinated orbit are called a shell. And Starlink has released all of the satellites for shell number 1. There's over 1,500 of them right now. They've been launched and they'll be ready probably sometime in August 21 for the switch to be flipped and for them all to be functional. Starlink is in beta right now and some people do have access, but there's going to be a little more happening by August of this year, which is 2021. This current shell with these version 1 satellites covers most of the Earth from about 57 degrees north to 57 degrees south latitude. And that just kind of excludes, the polar regions and Alaska, but most of the world is kind of covered. But there's a catch. These V1 satellites rely on ground stations to actually work so you can connect to your internet here on Earth. And these V1 satellites do not talk to each other. Now, Starlink has been putting ground stations, across the planet, and they've got a lot of coverage here in the United States. In fact, here is a map showing all of the satellites that Starlink has currently in motion. The blue dots are satellites and the orange dots are ground stations. You can see this live map at starlink.sx and it'll give you an idea of coverage. This is not a map that is provided by Starlink. This is a third party that put this map up here. Starlink is currently available in a lot of locations, but more satellites should be flipped on in August of 2021 when shell number 1 is complete, which will provide probably a little more coverage in more of the world. It's my understanding that as of this recording, Starlink is only turned on at 33.6 degrees latitude and above. That's pretty much Los Angeles, California and above. Since this first shell of version 1 satellites relies on ground stations, it means that A, there's not a ton of coverage yet, and B, if you're out in the middle of the ocean or in the middle of the desert where there are no ground stations, you're not going to have any coverage at all. Also, Starlink needs licenses for every country it's in, and it's got licenses in several countries, but by no stretch does it have licenses everywhere in the world yet. The next shell, the next round of satellites is supposed to be ready in early 2022, and those are going to be satellites in polar orbit, so covering the North and South Poles, so covering pretty much the rest of the world. These are version 1.5 satellites, and they are a big improvement over the version 1 satellites because these version 1.5 satellites can communicate with each other, which means they don't rely on a ground station to talk to each other. So they can relay information from one satellite to the next until it can be sent to a ground station somewhere here where there is more land and less water. What does that mean for you? Well, if you are sailing in the middle of the ocean, sometime in early 2022, you may be able to get internet coverage way out there. Or if you're in the middle of the desert somewhere where there aren't a ton of ground stations. So that's kind of a big deal. Even after Shells 1 and Shells 2 are fully deployed and switched on, there is still going to be the issue of capacity. Each satellite has only a certain amount of capacity. So the next 5 shells, which will consist of over 4,000 satellites, is going to be focused entirely on increasing that capacity. And these will also be version 2 satellites, not version 1 and 1.5, but version 2 satellites that have even more functionality. It's unclear exactly what all of the additional functionality is, but they will be able to route traffic entirely through space. Once those version 2 satellites are launched in the next 5 shells, that should greatly increase capacity and performance. And this is going to be over the course of several years. And then over the next several years, even more satellites are going to be launched, up to as many as 30,000 satellites. Once that's all done, it should be, I would imagine, pretty great all over the world. But, you know, we don't know for sure yet because it hasn't happened. And it's a pretty expensive and ambitious effort. In fact, at the moment, Starlink is losing money with every kit they sell. It's my understanding that they cost, what, $1,000 or $2 to make each satellite setup, but they're selling for $500. So they're working on that. If you want faster internet from outer space, do me a favor and hit that like button and smack subscribe. I've looked at my analytics and only like 25% of you that watch my videos are subscribed. So subscribe, you're gonna miss stuff. Who is Starlink's target? Starlink's target is the most remote 3.5% of the world. It is not meant to replace the internet in big cities and urban areas. In fact, Elon Musk says that Starlink will be at a great disadvantage in very populated areas because, my guess is because you only have so many satellites overhead at a time and each satellite has limited capacity. Whereas if you are connected via fiber or 5G, you've got all of this technology on the ground. This could be able to handle much more load than a few satellites overhead over a big city. So Starlink intentionally limits the number of units they sell in each location so they can control capacity and make sure that the speeds and performance stay good. If you live in a high density area, you may not even be able to purchase Starlink. Starlink is meant to complement 5G and fiber, not to replace it. Elon Musk talks about working hand in hand with ground-based internet companies rather than competing against them. He's not trying to dominate the market. He is trying to provide internet where it's really hard to get. Currently, Starlink is very much in beta and not available everywhere. There are mixed reports about how well it's working. Some people that have had like very poor internet are like giddy. They're getting some of them 300 megabits per second download speeds, which is huge with super low latency. But as satellites pass us by and the connection hands off from one satellite to the next, people are reporting drop connections. So if you need a solid connection with no drops, it may not be the answer for you. If you're on an important Zoom call and it disappears, then that could be a problem. If you're using it for business, that could be a problem. And even when Starlink is fully complete and they have all the bugs and the kinks worked out in a few years, it may still have that handoff drop-off issue. So it may not be the be-all end-all solution, even if you are at a fixed address in a remote area, which is what Starlink is made for right now. Just to clarify, Starlink is currently meant to work in the Tules at a fixed location. It's not designed to be stuck on top of your RV or put in a sailboat yet or to be moved around. However, recently Starlink has turned on the ability to move it from one location to another, but when you shut it off at one location, you turn it on another location, and it may or may not work there depending on what the capacity is. Starlink is limiting capacity. And let's say you did move it 100 miles away because you're traveling in an RV and you manually set it up, which you can do and some people are doing, but then you go back to maybe a home base and try to turn it back on. If capacity is filled there, they may deny you the ability to turn your internet back on. So Starlink is not meant to be moved around now, even though there's kind of a way to work the system, which may or may not work for you depending on where you are and how much capacity there is right now. But here's the thing, Elon Musk did state that Starlink will be ready for mobile use at some time in the future. It's unclear when exactly. Soonest would probably be early 2022, but who knows? If you're thinking about buying Starlink, I would wait because they need A, more satellites in the sky, and B, they need something that is a little more mobile friendly than that massive kit they have right now that is meant to be stuck at a fixed location like a house. So if you're thinking about it, you probably want to wait till Starlink progresses a little further. So while there is a way to use the current Starlink kit for mobile use, it's pretty cumbersome and most people aren't probably willing to go through that much effort every time they move their rig somewhere else. There are other issues as well. Number one, because you are connecting to satellites in the sky, you can't have anything in the way, like trees. Right now, I'm staring at a bunch of, 80 to 100 foot trees, and I don't know if where I am right now, if Starlink would even work. By the way, I'm currently in a forest, and I have a 24/7 live cam in my forest. If you ever want to see, hey, what's in Trevor's forest? There's a link for that right up there. It's a cam that shows deer, turkeys, skunks, squirrels all the time. It's pretty cool, pretty relaxing little fountain, just chilling. So if you want to check that out, you want to spy on my forest, yeah, you're welcome to. Just click right up there. If you're trying to use Starlink where there are trees or buildings or stuff that can block as satellites go by, you could drop connections a lot, and people are reporting that. As more satellites are in the sky over the years, that's going to be less of an issue because I'm guessing they'll be closer together and faster handoffs and better technology. Another issue is the satellite kit that you get is big and bulky currently. When they make one for mobile use, I'm sure it'll be smaller, but it's still going to be big and bulky. Elon says that it's not meant to go in a Tesla. It's too big for that. It's for, buses and RVs and ships and boats and trucks. It's not meant for little cars. It's also a power hog. I mean, you're getting internet from the sky with a satellite, so it sucks up way more power than, say, your cell phone. If you are boondocking and you're relying on solar to power everything, it could be an issue. Another issue to consider is people may want to travel from, say, the US to Canada and Mexico and maybe even South America. But the way it's set up now, he's got licenses in individual countries, and the setup you have for, say, the USA is not going to work in Mexico or Canada. You'd need an entirely separate setup to make that work. Bottom line, if you're traveling full-time in an RV or traveling across the world in a sailboat, it's not ready for you quite yet. You probably want to wait until the technology catches up and there are a bunch more satellites in the sky, especially those version 1.5 satellites that'll be able to talk to each other. However, when it's all fully up and running, it's probably going to be an amazing complement to the internet setup you have right now, though it may never be completely a full setup that replaces everything. That kind of remains to be seen. For more RV tips and tricks, click that video right up there. YouTube thinks you want to watch that video. Let me know in the comments which video is more interesting to you, that one or that one. Remember to hit subscribe by clicking right down there. I can't wait to share our adventures with you.